So AI, artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence? What does everybody think? Where does it sit? Now, I know technically, of course, AI is artificial intelligence. I suppose the reason behind that question is simply, do you see it as something that replaces, or do you see it as something that augments? And what does that look like? Amy, do you mind if we start with you?
I don't know that if I really think about it, it's augmenting what's already there. I totally agree with that idea. But it's also still not real, right? It's not, I mean, it is real knowledge. It's real, but it's not from a human. And it's interesting watching all the researchers at Michigan working on AI in the different ways it can happen. And I have some like excitement and a lot of fears about it, but I would say it's still, I guess I would go with augmented. And hadn't thought about that question before. It's a good one.
Well, I suppose the sort of the point behind it is that I think the fear factor around AI is around the artificial bit. And I think if you start explaining to people that this is there to help you, it is there to augment what you do and make things better, I think you start to change that conversation.
Sure. Yes, but there's still a lot of stuff to think about as far as like, so I'm working with a faculty member who's working on emotion recognition in AI, right? So understanding like through cadence of speech and speed and tone, what someone is actually feeling. And I think that is augmenting, but also it's mostly right, but it's not always right. Does that make sense? So there is still artificial.
Yeah, absolutely. Charles, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, I would say instead of AI, more like IA, right? Intelligent augmentation is really what we're striving for. And, my conversations a while back with John Havens over at the IEEE on, ethics around AI has a lot to do with that. And I think, we've all got a bit of a responsibility, perhaps even a Hippocratic oath, of, if you will, around the responsibility of doing this the right way so that it benefits people, planet, and, a prosperous process for all of us.
Yeah, A2.AI. Yeah, it slightly spoils the alliteration of the A2.AI, doesn't it? If it's A2.AI. But other than that, I'd like, it's absolutely right. Jason, what do you think about that, sir?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I think, I agree. I agree with Amy and Charles. Sorry, Adam. But I agree. I think it's really what we see in practical application today is it's helping. Like the actual application of artificial intelligence today is still helping when it's done at its best, helping humans make better decisions. So there's still sort of like this human in the loop processing where it's not replacing jobs, and it's not like, we're not really seeing mass job replacement. What we're seeing is just better decision making, right? So it's helping everything when it's wired up to help people make better decisions. That's when the magic happens, and that's when customers and consumers are happy and businesses are happy, and so it's sort of like a grow the pie scenario unfolding versus like carve up a pie.
Christy, that same question to you though, and I like Charles's IA. Is that your do you think that's the direction of AI?
I take a little bit of a different approach, I think, to looking at it, because I'll disagree slightly with Jason. Jason, I love you, but I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I do think that AI or computers or the kinds of algorithms we can replace and things like that, they have replaced jobs, but computers have taken the place of repetitive jobs. They haven't taken the place of what I would call intelligent jobs that require a lot of thinking and analytics. So I don't think that any of the AI applications are really replacing intelligence. So to that end, I think we are looking at augmented intelligence, not necessarily artificial intelligence. But I do think computers and machines are very, very, very good at being programmed to do repetitive tasks that have replaced people's work. I mean, I started in this industry 25 years ago, and the jobs are way different than they were then. And it's largely because of our compute resources and the kinds of mathematics that have evolved the business and the industry.
Doug?
Same question?
Yes, sir.
it's interesting. I'm a practitioner for customer service. I'm certainly not a master of data, a data wonk, or anything like that. And what we've seen in what we do when we present AI to our fan base, the average bear, the customer, it's interesting. I look at business intelligence and AI, and I think there's another conversation we can have on that. But when it comes to AI, to me right now, in implementing, it is artificial. It is not necessarily augmenting. I'll give a quick example. Simple example of a chatbot. Chatbots, which primarily are there to take care of the low-hanging fruit, to make sure that the simple repetitive questions that are lather, rinse, repeat, are taken care of and efficiently and efficiently for the customer. And then the agent, the care specialist, can truly be an extension of the brand, doing much more, digging deeper when the opportunity presents itself, not putting the agent out there to deal with these same questions over and over. And our chatbots are elegant. They don't take themselves too seriously. They have goofy names like Bot Van Pelt. It looks a lot like Scott Van Pelt, who is some of our talent. And the outcome is our chatbots, no matter how elegant the conversation is, will receive out of 5 an average CSAT score of about 1.2. Whereas an agent will always receive, if an elegant experience takes place, 4 or 5. And part of the reason is that no matter what happens, the chatbot is not replacing the live agent and could at this point in time, even with all the elegant analysis of keywords and determining fan sentiment in real time with the conversation, the bot's very good, but the bot's no human. So it's truly artificial. It's not necessarily making it better. We hope one day it will. Now, AI, we see on other elements, can be used to really augment the experience, but I'm not sold that it's truly augmenting at this point in time in a practical model.
No, lovely, Doug. Thank you very much. And a lot there we can come back to kind of properly chew over and explore. Mike, what's your kind of point of view on the augmented artificial at this stage?
Well, Doug just made a pretty convincing argument there, but I sit in a space of that. The information is all there, and the algorithms are augmenting how we're looking at it, how we're using it, what we're doing with it, and so on. And so, I don't see it as artificial. I think Doug's point of it, maybe the outputs are artificial, but the data is all there. I mean, we're still working inside of a binary environment, right? And so that's my take. I find that it's an augmentation of what exists, not. I like that word better too, because one of the things that I struggle with on this topic is, any major transition, any major change. You mentioned the Industrial Revolution. Everyone is always terrified of what the new world is going to look like, and there's no reason to believe that the stuff that's happening and the stuff that people are working on isn't going to be a positive experience, right? And so I think oftentimes when there's major change like this, fear takes over. And so therefore I kind of like utilizing the word augment as opposed to artificial, because it's a more gentle, or it's a more positive term.
Reynold, last but certainly not least, sir.
Yeah, so the first thing I think, well, first let me just say, I approach it from the operator standpoint. I'm not a data scientist. I'm not, I'm the good idea fairy as the general who comes up with the good ideas, and it's folks like you all and others who figure out how to take the data that's out there and make it into something useful for me. But when I think about both AI and, AU or augmented, whatever that word was, right? So you can already tell I'm pretty deep in the subject. I think back to the early 80s when, we all carried around, or some of us carried around, big brick bag cell phones and thought we were the coolest cats on the block, right? And who thought back then that you wanted to watch TV on your cell phone, right? Who thought back then that, you were going to be able to watch TV on your big black bag cell phone that you carried around? And now, today there's more data on my smartphone than I had on my 386 computer with a 5.25 inch floppy drive that I used to boot up in DOS. And so I think about the progress, and I think it was Christy who said, well, it's really AI has done the repetitive tasks that are out there today, hasn't really gone much beyond these other types of activities. And maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, Christy, but now I think, well, 30 years ago or 40 years ago, I carried around a big bag cell phone. And now today I have this cell phone that does everything I could ever want it to do. Now think 30 years in the future, when our grandkids are going to say to us, I can't believe you actually drove those things, talking about cars, right? And so when we think about, artificial intelligence and augmented capabilities, I think that the applications are really endless. But I think, to Charles's point, it's the ethical use of that, right? From a military perspective, as an operator, I would love predictive analytics. So when I was at Northcom, the commander and I were very actively involved in our ground-based interceptors for, ballistic missile defense of the homeland. So I would love to have predictive analytics to know what the adversary is going to do, whether it's the Russians flying bombers off the north coast of Alaska, and we're flying interceptors up there with the Canadians and our NORAD partners, or the North Koreans going to launch a missile. I would love to have predictive analytics so we could anticipate those things. Facial recognition, I think Amy mentioned the facial recognition pieces of it, right? And people's emotions. Well, there's ethical applications of that I think we have to be careful of, because it is the trust factor. As the technology advances to the point where our grandchildren are going to question what we were even thinking when we got behind the wheel of a car to actually drive it, what's the ethical pieces of that? And I think that, to me, is you guys are going to be the smart ones to figure out how to use all of this data and how to make it smarter so that we can do precision execution and we can anticipate everything that we can and things that we can't. And we can find the magic in the problem when we're trying to take all of this data together. You'll be able to figure that stuff out. But it's the ethical application of it, I think, that is going to be the long pole in the tent, so that people trust it over